PSV claimed a 5-1 home win over Excelsior. Dest and Pepi both started. Pepi scored one of the goals, but on the play, he fell awkwardly, fractured his forearm. He's going to be out 2 months.
Such a a horrible piece of news for someone that if you listened to us last week or any week for that matter, we've been talking about and at times talking up because of the the scoring, I guess, rampage that he has been on, but also all of the rumors swirling where he's going to go. As you said, it was a strange moment. He got his goal just to add to his tally, but he fell awkwardly. And in the moment, you don't necessarily think there's a problem, except, I mean, he ended up rolling into the goal and falling. And then you realize, oh my goodness, something is really, really wrong. Now, any injury that a national team player has at this point is going to be magnified because of, as we record this today, we are 150 days away from this summer's World Cup. And someone like Ricardo Pepi, who was coming on strong to, a lot of people think, to challenge Balogun for that striker position up there. This doesn't rule him out, but this is not great timing relative to the March window. You can certainly play at times with padding and casts and all that kind of stuff. And it says he's only going to be out 2 months, but he did get surgery. And surgery before a World Cup, no matter what, isn't good. But I guess it's better than if it were to be a different extremity. So I hope that they put the plates or do whatever they have to do. He gets back. But I think this probably means that for the March camp, it's going to be iffy to see him, which is kind of a bummer because that competition that we're talking about would have been good to see.
Staying with the center forward theme, but skipping over to England, Norwich City beat Walsall 5-1 in the FA Cup. Josh Sargent did not play. Norwich boss Philip Clement said afterwards Sargent asked not to play because of a possible transfer, and we came to find out Toronto FC have offered $18 million for his services. Norwich are saying he's not for sale, but Sargent is reportedly keen on the move. We've talked about this. Pochettino being favorable towards MLS, how that would influence some transfer decisions. Here's Josh Sargent in his mid-20s, a player who could have moved to the Bundesliga or the Premier League this past summer, now evidently wants to go to MLS. That is generating strong reaction on social media.
Yeah, I mean, so there's certainly a part of this story that is, like we just talked about Ricardo Pepi, relative to this summer and doing everything that you possibly can to be in the good graces of Mauricio Pochettino. And let's also be honest, Josh Sargent has been not in the good graces because he just has not performed and hasn't performed consistently where you would put him in. I don't even think he's necessarily in the top 3-4 strikers when it comes to Pochettino and this team. Now, this move, the other part of me looks at this move as this is much more of a long-term type of situation, given the money involved, $18 million transfer fee. But there's also, I guess there's a third part to this too, and you mentioned it very early on. The fact that his own coach came out and he didn't throw him under the bus because he was very honest about the fact that this player texted me and told me I'm not ready to play because of a transfer situation that's going on. Now, look, we've always seen and heard moments where they say, "Oh, the player's head's being turned," and can it, I guess, mess with you mentally when these things are happening, even though these are first world problems, and even though these are all wonderful champagne problems to be had. Somebody actually wants to buy you. Somebody wants to pay a boatload of money for you, record amount of money for you, to come back to Major League Soccer, in this case to Toronto FC. But it's a bad look for him, I think, to have this out there where he begged off of playing for the team that is wholly responsible for him to even be in this position of coming back. Now, I put that aside. Is this a good move for Josh Sargent? I'm not sure it changes anything again in the short term, but I do think in the long term, this is that biggish type of move where he can come back to a club that traditionally has spent a lot of money and is looking to kind of get back on top. And I think he has done all that he feels he probably can, and maybe that EPL type of situation is a bridge too far for him.
And remember, Sargent never actually played in MLS. He left for
Right.
Europe at a
Right.
very young age. I always find it fascinating to contrast the reactions that Brazilians and Americans have to their players leaving Europe to go back to their domestic league. Right now, there's a situation. This Brazilian midfielder Lucas Paquetá, who's going to be in the World Cup squad, he plays for West Ham. He's trying to force a move back to Flamengo. And I know each situation is different, has its own idiosyncrasies, but generally speaking, Brazilians are pro their domestic league. They don't like playing second fiddle to Europe. They think it's cool when a guy who's good, who could be playing in Europe, chooses to play in Brazil instead. And you just don't see that same reaction with American fans.
I think it's because there is a belief, or a perception, I guess, that you're settling and that you are regressing. And I think that listen, uh, this gets into a much deeper and longer conversation. We're not going to have it here, but we certainly could have it. The psyche of the American fan, the psyche of American soccer. And let's be honest, the history of American soccer, especially when it's painted as, an elite sport, an affluent sport. And at times it certainly has been. And so therefore, with that comes the questioning of how much do the players actually want it? How much are they willing to give? And in this moment, I think for those that believe that part of the problem for American soccer is American soccer players not wanting it enough, when that happens, they look at it as they're taking the easy way out. Now, and again, I think it's wrong, and I can certainly argue against it, but I think that's where that comes from.
And you mentioned Sargent right now, clearly behind Balogun and Pepi in the
Mm.
pecking order, and probably Ajiman as well. Balogun this past weekend scored for Monaco in their 3-1 away win in the French Cup over US Orléans. So he's producing. Pepe's producing. He did pick up this injury. But yeah, you wonder if Sargent moves back to Toronto, how many goals would he have to score to potentially impress Pochettino enough to work his way back into the picture?
Yeah, and again, I go back to, why are you texting your coach? Maybe have a call with your coach and say, "Listen, I have this life-changing type of decision or possibility on the offense." And maybe you come to an agreement, "Okay, yeah, this isn't the moment for you to play." But it's a bad look. And it plays into what I was talking about players being weak, because you can't handle what is really ultimately a good thing, a wonderful thing, in that moment. You are weak and can't handle that. That's a problem. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. That's the perception from the outside when that happens. But this might happen, and I'd love to see what Josh Sargent does look like, to your point, in MLS for the first time, and in particular with Toronto, given what I think the aspirations at least have been in the past.
Before we depart French football, we never got a chance to talk about the French Super Cup, which took place last week in Kuwait. PSG against Marseille. Timmy Weah started for Marseille. Then Bailey scored early in the first half, 1-0 PSG. Then late in the second half, Greenwood and a Pacha own goal gave Marseille the 2-1 lead. They were seconds away from their first trophy in 14 years. But then Aubameyang, he's getting crucified for this. Instead of dribbling to the corner, he tried to score, lost the ball. Shades of Ginola against Bulgaria in 93. You clearly have some thoughts on that. PSG broke the other way. Gonzalo Ramos at the death, 2-2. We go to penalties. PSG prevail.
Okay, the dribbling to the corner to waste time, okay? This is kind of drilled into you because there was a point where this became smart soccer. And I get it. Milking the clock, not just in soccer, but in many sports, is absolutely a way to go, and certainly is a skill, and one that at times needs to be taught. In that, you if you eat up that clock, it's less opportunity for your opponent to score. However, I think it maybe in particular, and I'll never forget, years and years ago, um, I was playing for the New England Revolution, and look, Darren Sawatsky, wonderful guy, wonderful player, actually. Um, he was so eager to be a sponge to information. He was very young at the time, and I'll never forget. Um, our coach told him that, if that happens and we're winning, okay, go and waste time in the corner and dribble to the corner. And I'll never forget, he was in on a breakaway and literally veered out of a breakaway to go to the corner instead of trying to actually score. And I just think it confers a sense of defense first that is almost capitulating. And I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that he did anything wrong in trying to score. I don't think you can ever do anything wrong in trying to score in the game of soccer. And maybe that's a little too romantic of me.
In the shootout, Chevalier saved 2 of 3 Marseille attempts. And PSG in the Intercontinental Cup against Flamengo recently, their goalkeeper that day, Safonov, saved 4 of 5 penalties in the shootout. So in the last 2 shootouts PSG have been involved in, their keepers have saved 6 of 8 attempts.
They
That's
must
pretty incredible.
something AI. It's got to be AI. There's something going on.
And it's interesting because trophies beget other trophies. You win the Champions League, you get to play in the UEFA Super Cup and the Intercontinental Cup. You win your league, you get to play in the domestic Super Cup. And PSG have cashed in on all those opportunities, but they made hard work of it. In the UEFA Super Cup against Tottenham in August, they were down 2-0 in the 85th minute, came back, scored twice, took it to penalties, won on penalties. Then Flamengo in the Intercontinental Cup, it was 1-1. They went to penalties, they won. And then this one, down 2-1, seconds away from losing, they get the equalizer, prevailed on penalties.
So are these teams going to ever play back in their home countries at anytime soon? Or
Yeah, it does seem to be a trend. We're going to talk about the Spanish Super Cup in a minute, which took place in Saudi Arabia. Do you have any thoughts on that? All these games going to the Middle East?
No, I mean, some of it is just relative to in the winter, and obviously, not only is it good weather, but you also get paid a lot, and you're spreading the brand. So I get it. I understand. This is the new norm. Who knows when MLS switches to that new schedule, there might be some opportunities out there for MLS teams.
On the topic of trophies, Crystal Palace, we know, won the FA Cup last season. This year, they crash out in the third round, falling victim to one of the biggest upsets in competition history this past weekend. They lost 2-1 to sixth-tier Macclesfield. These two sides separated by 117 spots in the league ladder. It's the first time since 1908 that a non-league team beat the FA Cup holders. Crystal Palace actually did it back in 1908, beating Wolves. From an American perspective, Chris Richards on the wrong end of this one. He started for Palace.
Yeah. So, I mean, so much to say about the Open Cup. First off, wonderful scenes. And I think you have to be completely devoid of heart and, I guess, of romance to not at least appreciate what you're seeing. But also, let's be honest, the reason why Open Cups have that romance is because of the allure and the possibility that exists of cup sets and Cinderellas and the haves versus the have-nots. That is what an Open Cup gives you. And when it doesn't, it's just kind of ho-hum until you get to the actual winner who, obviously raises a trophy, and that's always wonderful for them to kind of put it, but it's always being put as part of whatever else they do during that year. So, and my point is that when it comes to Open Cups, this is why we watch Open Cups, much more so than to have the big teams win, whether it's through the cup or ultimately standing there at the end. It's hey, there's a possibility that we might see something, in this case, that we haven't seen in 100 years happen in front of our eyes. And that it did, I think it was wonderful, and it was fun to see, and it made the FA Cup day that much more impressive.
Macclesfield will face Brentford in the fourth round. A few notes on them. They're managed by John Rooney, the brother of Wayne Rooney.
Oh.
And as you know, with these non-league teams, the players have regular jobs. They're just part-time
Yep.
players. So you look at up and down the squad, there's a school teacher, a gym owner, property developer, and a former Love Island winner, some guy named Tom Clare that I guess won on Love Island. I got a text Stu Holden. That's his favorite TV show.
Well, this would be the kind of stuff. I mean, we used to do FA Cup, remember?
I was going to say, your first production for Fox, January of 2015,
Yep.
was an FA Cup match. I remember the first time we ever spoke, you called me a week or two before to ask for research help. And then you were so devoted to your job back then, you wanted to make a good first impression of
then.
Fox. Well, since you've learned that you could probably get away with some inane platitudes. But back then, didn't you reach out to one of these lower league
Oh,
clubs,
yeah,
speak to the technical director?
It was, I can't, I don't have it in front of me here, but I would reach out to these, I mean, like you said, just completely small little clubs, and they were so appreciative that anybody, let alone somebody from the U.S., was actually calling them. I remember at one point I got on back then it was like Skype or whatever we were doing. I got on a Skype call, and I mean, was a kid basically that was the PR director, among other things there, that was in charge of giving me the information. And, his mom's walking around in the background and stuff. It was wonderful. It was very romantic. But again, there was the appreciation that this was what the Open Cup was about, much more so than the big teams and the ultimate winners.
But again, so this upset led to a lot of people waxing poetic about the FA Cup this past weekend. And one guy, Kevin Corbett, does not care. said on X, "I wish America had something 1% as cool as the FA Cup," and you
Ooh.
had to jump in and reply to that.
Well, okay, yes. And this, it's not the public's responsibility to have context. It's not the public's responsibility to have historical perspective. But not for nothing, Kevin, but the US Open Cup, US Lamar Hunt US Open Cup, it's been around for what, 111 years or something like that, which in and of itself is a piece of soccer history. Now, you have to work to go back and to find the information about that, but there are plenty of moments, all right, that have been romantic. You know, you think of Cal FC with our friend Eric Winalda up there in Portland. All right. I got to feel that that was cool, at least 1% cool. I thought it was cool at the time when my Detroit City FC beat Columbus. You know, the list goes on and on and on. But also, the reality is, again, like most Open Cups, an MLS team has won every single Open Cup since what, 1999, back when the Rochester Rhinos were the last non-MLS team to win it. So again, you're waiting for those moments. You're waiting for those Cinderella stories. But I don't think that America hasn't produced something 1% as cool as the FA Cup. And I know the US Open Cup has taken a lot of hits over the last couple of years. But I do think at the very least, there's some sort of 1%, Kevin, that you can find in terms of the coolness and the unique. And you know, I know it's kind of quirky when it comes to the U.S. Open Cup relative to the FA Cup, but this is what we have, and I do think that there is a coolness to the U.S. Open Cup.
Eric also orchestrated some upsets with the Atlanta Silverbacks, right? He's been something of a giant killer in the US Open Cup
That's
over
his
the years.
specialty. I think he would say is coaching them up when it comes to players out there. But yeah, again, it's not just about cool for an Open Cup. I think that there is a much bigger and deeper coolness that exists in American soccer if you care to actually go find it. And so to just blanket and say, in this case, Open Cup, but a lot of people will blanket and say just American soccer in general, 1% as cool as the EPL or something like that. Well, then immediately when you say that, I know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Anyway.
We go to Serie A match that just went final. Juventus hammered Cremonese 5-0. Weston McKennie among the scorers. He continues his incredible form. And to go back to our Sargent discussion, McKennie is another player who's been talked about as possibly going back to MLS.
Yeah, do you and we talked, I think, a couple weeks ago about obviously, we talked about Weston a bunch of times, but again, I don't know if Weston is ready to come back to MLS, and keep in mind that for him, I think it really would be a personal decision, all right? You know, for Josh Sargent, this is probably as good as it gets for him, and maybe even better than he ever thought he would have coming back to MLS. But I think Weston McKennie is going to have a lot of different offers. As we mentioned last show, he's playing out his contract, and knock on big wood, he doesn't get hurt, has a good World Cup, and then there will be other offers in Europe. So if he comes back to MLS, it'll be, I think, purely because that's what he wants to do at this time.
The Bundesliga returned this past weekend after its winter break. Borussia Mönchengladbach claimed a 4-0 win over Augsburg. Joe Scally had a strong performance, including scoring one of the Gladbach goals. Gio Reyna came on as a sub. Noah Kai Banks started for Augsburg. And this is how committed people like Doug McIntyre are to this Banks thing.
Oh my
He
God, here we
posted
go.
on X afterwards, superb performance from Joe Scally and Gladbach's 4-0 drubbing of Augsburg. And Noah Kai Banks played well despite the result. Gio Reyna subbed in for Scally, who had a goal and a secondary assist in the 85th minute. Noah Kai Banks started at the back in a match in which his team lost 4-0, and Doug McIntyre still praised his performance.
Yeah, Stu's a big Banks guy too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, evidently they got this guy who's never played for the national team before starting next summer. Could happen. Could happen. I don't know. And I'm glad that an American is starting and starting consistently. The Joe Scally thing, the only reason he's getting a mention here is because he scored a goal, but sometimes it's not fair to defenders. I know that's when they kind of pop out, but as we're judging them, we know that, you know, if it goals, there's nothing more important than goals. But that Joe Scally scored, I don't think that changes the perception of him from Mauricio Pochettino or anybody outside of the U.S. soccer, you know, ecosphere. Is it an ecosphere?
Ecosystem.
Ecosystem.
Yeah.
What's omnisphere? What? Give me another sphere. Atmosphere. The sphere.
Have you been to the Sphere in Las Vegas?
I drove by it when I was in Vegas this past week. It's quite impressive just from the outside. I've never been on the inside, but I haven't met a single person that goes there and said, "Oh, this sucks." Every single person that goes there, regardless of who they're seeing, has said it's awesome. So I got to do that at some point.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.